Our target was $5,000. Hopefully, enough ground will be cleared for us to essentially lose anything at any time. Tony Beets did more than simply mine for gold this season. He engaged the Yukon itself in combat. The award was an incredible $3 million. The price, almost everything. The scales will soon tip with hundreds of ounces of unprocessed gold. There were times when the entire risk was worthwhile. However, there are also times when the cameras nearly miss something. The ruthless, uncensored meltdowns in which a Goldfield legend nearly lost everything. We simply need to remove it completely, construct a somewhat more robust replacement, reinstall it, and then resume our losing ways. A lot of individuals believe they are familiar with Tony's success story, but his victories don't hold the key. It's concealed in his worst catastrophe, $1 million worth of quiet. You know, quiet is the most costly sound a gold miner can hear in the harsh, merciless Yukon. Silence indicates that Tony Beets, the self-described king of the Klondike, is not operating his machines. Additionally, he isn't earning money if the devices aren't operating. The objective this season wasn't simply lofty, it was huge. A staggering $3 million in pure gold. Every aspect of his operation has to function perfectly in order to reach a figure that high. Steel and diesel combine to create a symphony that transforms frozen mud into dazzling riches. His one and only working wash plant served as the focal point of this ambitious scheme. Sloot was a monstrous machine. Well, that did the trick. Excellent. The plant should be moved. That's all. Then let us get it out of there. Correct. You most likely have it operational again by the time I return. That would be fantastic. That's the strategy. What no one tells you is that depending on a single piece of equipment, regardless of how strong it is like placing all of your money on one roll of the dice. There had been a ray of hope at the beginning of the season. Mike, Tony's cousin, had accomplished a crucial first step by successfully moving and starting the Sloot plant. It is an enormous undertaking to move and get a wash plant, a complicated network of conveyors, screens, and sloughs that is several stories high, functioning. Over 100,000 pounds of steel must be disassembled, transported over hazardous terrain by truck, and then meticulously put back together. A catastrophic failure can result from a single misplaced bolt. However, Mike succeeded. For a brief while, the path to $3 million was obvious as the plant ran, churning through pay dirt. However, not everything is as it seems. There is a method for the Yukon to remind you of authority. It occurred as the procedure was getting into its rhythm. A sound colder than any winter wind pierces the northern air. A horrible sound. A screeching, grinding outcry from the Sloot's heart. It sounded like metal consuming metal. Every child within hearing distance understood what it meant. Trouble. Big trouble. The music had ceased. Stop talking. A horrible noise is coming from the screen egg. It cannot be operated in this manner. It will demolish itself. The crew's desperate cries as they hurried to turn everything off were the only sound to break the eerie silence that ensued. The possible loss was enormous. The plant is inactive every single day. It may be a loss of $100,000. Already, the $3 million fantasy was starting to turn into a nightmare. There was a sense of dread in the air as the crew gathered around the silent machine. This was no little setback. Tony Beets was going to unleash the storm, and this was a full-fledged disaster. Every second was costing him a fortune, and the clock was running out. $100,000 a day. The first inquiry is, how did a machine worth millions of dollars go down? Who is the second, and much more hazardous, question? Tension was in the air as Tony Beets entered the scene. You see, a mechanical breakdown is more than just an issue that needs to be fixed for a man like Tony. It's an insult to the person. It indicates that one of his team members made a mistake. The inquiry got underway right away, and the offender was quickly identified. It wasn't a worn-out bearing or a bad wire. It was something far worse. A huge chunk of steel. It broke the impact plate that was supposed to withstand the violent force of hundreds of pounds of rock. It was impossible to operate the machine without utterly destroying the lower decks because of the enormous yawning space where solid metal should have been. The problem was worth 5 figures. At least they wouldn't happen today, and they would be down if people had been paying attention to the rocks. We already have enough issues without adding more due to carelessness, particularly if it will cost you $100 or more per day. There's nothing amusing about it, is there? However, no one tells you that a situation like this is caused rather than merely occurring. The evidence grew more damning as they investigated more. Massive boulders sat on the lower screens, which were meant to hold rocks little larger than a fist. These weren't meant to be present. There was only one meaning to their appearance. No one on the crew had been listening. They had been supplying the plant with large boulders that killed screens. This was the final sin for Tony. He saw more than a malfunctioning machine. Pure, unmitigated neglect was what he witnessed. He roared, his voice resonating throughout the hall. If people had been listening to the rock, then this does not occur at this time. He was a volcanic rage. This was no coincidence. This wound was self-inflicted. This error came at an enormous cost. While the quick fix was one thing, the downtime caused the most harm. They weren't getting any closer to the $3 million target with each hour the sloot remained mute. The error cost $100,000 every day, the disappearance of a fortune due to negligence. While many people are obsessed with the prospect of discovering a massive gold nugget, mining is actually a cruel game of efficiency. It's all about making the most of every moment of daylight and reducing downtime. Tony had a spectacular meltdown. His anger erupted into a tirade about attention to detail and the heavy cost of their failure, and he placed the responsibility entirely on his workers. Right alongside his wash plant, the boss's men's trust was breaking down. Both plant and the team's morale were in ruins. The miracle of 2 hours. Time cannot be measured in minutes in the gold mining industry. You use ounces to measure it. Tony Beets was bleeding gold with the sloot plant down. There was a great deal of pressure. Mike, his cousin, was focused while Tony was furious. Real leaders show up during times of crisis. One man was focused on the solution, while the other dealt with the rage of the issue. I have a large metal object that should be in here. Instead, we now have a wide divide. It appears that it began to wear here in the middle, and the entire impact was fractured as a result of the vibration. Without it, we cannot run. After successfully assembling the plant, Mike now had to do the impossible feat of repairing an impossible break under an impossible amount of pressure. The group is now looking to Mike for a way out of this issue after Tony verbally attacked them. No one ever tells you that a competent foreman is more than just a boss. They are a machine medic on the battlefield. The fix was a brilliant example of Klondike's inventiveness. Ordering a new impact plate from the south was not possible due to scheduling constraints. That would cost the season and take weeks. Rather, they had to operate on the wash plant in the field, doing open-heart surgery. This required working with heavy, harsh steel and creating a solution from scratch through cutting, welding, and fabrication. Every action had to be flawless. Under the extreme pressure, a poor weld could break, resulting in further harm. Under Mike's steady leadership, the entire crew labored with a tremendous sense of urgency. They were aware that Tony was observing, and that they were responsible for their season's outcome. It was intense ballet of passion, perspiration, and unwavering willpower. The subsequent events were nothing short of miraculous. In just 2 hours, a repair that ought to have taken a full day or more was finished. 2 hours. They had pulled victory out of a financial quagmire. Everyone held their breath when the signal to start the plant was given. The machine moaned and coughed before roaring back to life. The production symphony was back in full force. Tony was impressed too. His austere visage broke into a rare smile. Everything is fine. They were quite quick-witted, but it's quite difficult to find someone to handle the equipment. To the worn-out team, his acknowledgement of Mike's amazing labor was more valuable than gold. The catastrophe was avoided. They were back in the game, but their $3 million goal was now farther away than it had ever been due to the lost time. Could they make up the difference, even though the machine was operating? 146 bombs of evidence. The moment of truth has arrived. It all came down to one thing. After the amazing recovery and the disastrous failure, was the package filled with gold? You see, you can have the largest, most powerful machinery in the Klondike, but they are useless if they aren't situated on decent land. The entire tale would be revealed by the initial cleanup following the repair. It would be a sign of whether the $3 million dream was still alive, and the ultimate test of their tenacity. The tension was thick enough to sever with a knife as the crew meticulously removed the cell boxes, wiping away the thick black sand to expose the prize underneath. This is the most nerve-wracking aspect of the job. But no one tells you that. It's the point at which all of the effort, perspiration, and tension either pay off or result in sour disappointment. The outcome was breathtaking. At a whopping 146.1 ounces of pure Yukon gold, the scales tipped. That one cleanup was worth more than $360,000 at the current market price. It was not too horrible, even for Tony, a man who has seen more gold than most people can ever imagine. For a huge win, a classic Beets understatement. It was okay. I mean, you just need to put forth the effort. Wouldn't have been better if it was open 24 hours a day. This victory wasn't the only one. It was a declaration. It was evidence that they were back on course and had recovered from the catastrophe. On the allegation, the atmosphere immediately changed from one of fear to one of joy. The warm, weighty glow of accomplishment overshadowed the meltdown. The financial pain of the downtime was more than made up for by this one paycheck. Their season total reached an astounding 1,250 ounces because to this amazing haul, the camp was rocked when they performed the calculations. Officially, they were across the finish line. Their gold was worth $3.1 million in total. Not only had they accomplished their objective, they had beyond it. Once more, the Vikings had taken control of the Yukon. It demonstrated his unwavering determination and his team's capacity to pull triumph out of the jaws of defeat. But is it actually the story? Is it just about putting in a lot of effort and meeting your goals? Or are we overlooking something important? The problem is that it can be difficult to distinguish between reality and television when you're under this much pressure and financial strain. Although they achieved their objective, the truth is never so clear-cut. Is it merely a show? That's what they did. $3.1 million. Doesn't it feel like the ideal conclusion to a Hollywood film? His workforce is pushed to the limit by the large, brutal boss. They triumph with a mound of gold after overcoming a huge season-ending challenge. But let's have a direct conversation for a moment. Is life truly so simple, especially the rough and tumble life of a Klondike gold miner? It's simple to become engrossed in the plot of these shows, but you have to question whether it all happens at once. They are weighing a record quantity of gold, which coincidentally happens to be the precise amount they need to surpass their goal. 1 minute, a calamity threatens to destroy the season. How are things doing for you all in India? We're losing, all right. We're losing, yes. The only people profiting from this are us. There you have it. Are there any important details that we are missing here? The problem is that we most definitely are. First and foremost, reality television is a business, and that business is entertainment. A show requires viewers to be successful. Additionally, the drama and risks must be really high in order to attract viewers. Consider the flawless plot arc we just saw. You experienced the catastrophic failure, the enormous breakdown that brought everything to a complete standstill. Then Tony, the Viking King, had his spectacular outburst and let his rage run wild. The incredibly quick 2-hour repair came next. A Klondike miracle, indeed. And the great finale, a goal-crushing, precisely timed gold way. It's an amazing tale, a wonderful release and intention. A bit too great, perhaps. We're not arguing that the task isn't extremely difficult or that the gold isn't real. That living is a never-ending struggle with the weather, broken machinery, and financial disaster. Every ounce these miners extract from the permafrost is their revenue. However, the story we perceive is carefully constructed. Majority of people are unaware that producers are present and tasked with finding and shaping these stories. Intense music and unsteady cameras amplify the meltdowns. The winds are always positioned for maximum dramatic impact, and the deadlines are intensified to create a continuous sense of a ticking clock. The $100,000 day is a great soundbite that heightens the suspense for everyone watching at home, even though it may be a true assessment of possibilities. 100, 110, 120, 130, 14,610, 15, 20, 40, 60. Though we don't always see the whole picture, we certainly see the fight. There are likely dozens of smaller routine fixes for every catastrophic breakdown they display, all of which are handled coolly and effectively but are left on the cutting room floor because they aren't spectacular enough. Perhaps more important to Tony Beets' success than his indisputable mining prowess is his command of the made-for-TV world he lives in. Therefore, is Tony Beets a master showman or a master miner? Perhaps both are the answer. What do you believe to be true? Tell us below. For more, like and subscribe.